A single targeted strike in the dark of Diabali has just shattered the spine of a 10-year terror network. On the 27th of May, an elite clandestine assembly of the topmost echelon of the al-Qaeda-linked group known as JNYM was completely decimated in the Segu region. For years, these brutal mercenaries imposed a ruthless fuel and food blockade on innocent civilians, weaponizing fear to dismantle the very fabric of local autonomy. They believed the shadows of the Sahel would forever shield their crimes from accountability. Yet the Malian Armed Forces, rising with an unyielding spirit, launched a crushing precision onslaught that turned a terrorist stronghold into a graveyard. This is the moment a sovereign nation chose to fight back, rewriting the geopolitical matrix of West Africa. If power changes hands, but not structure, has anything really changed? Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates with your commitment to global justice, show your support with a comment or a subscription to the Upright Chronicles. It means more than numbers. It keeps the flame of independence alive. Welcome to the Upright Chronicles, where we unmask the truths mainstream media deliberately ignores. Tonight we look past the shallow Western reporting to reveal how Mali, alongside its partners in the Alliance of Sahel states, is executing a masterclass in modern counterinsurgency. This is not merely a report on military tactics. It is a profound chronicle of a people reclaiming their inherent dignity. From the drone-filled skies of Mopti to the halls of political power in Gabon and Senegal, a tectonic shift is underway. Get ready, because the story you are about to hear will reshape how you view the map of global freedom forever. To understand the true weight of what transpired in the midnight shadows of Diabali on the 27th of May, one must first look backward into the archives of a betrayed nation. For a generation, the Sahel has been forced to endure a manufactured instability, a perpetual conflict where the lines between local grievances and global terror networks were deliberately blurred by external architects. At the very center of this dark web stood a man whose name became synonymous with calculated brutality, Saddan ag Itar, known widely across the desert tracts as Saddan ag Hita. He was not a simple zealot born of the isolated sands. He was an institutional insider who turned his back on his own people. Long before he became the second in command of the topmost echelon of the extremist alliance known as JNIM, he wore the uniform of the very state he would later try to destroy. In the early 2000s, he served as a sergeant major within the National Guard of Mali. He swore a solemn oath to protect the citizenry, but in 2006, during the Tuareg rebellion, he chose the path of desertion. He traded his nation's flag for the black banner of terror, taking with him invaluable tactical knowledge and deep military secrets. This was the birth of a phantom that would terrorize West Africa for 2 decades. Historical security intelligence briefs detail his direct culpability in some of the most heinous acts of violence ever recorded on Malian soil. In November 2013, he was the master planner behind the ruthless kidnapping and subsequent execution of 2 French journalists, Ghislaine Dupont and Claude Verlon, in the northern city of Kidal. In 2019, his tactical footprint directed the infamous Agwalhawk ambush, a devastating assault that resulted in the tragic deaths of 10 United Nations peacekeepers. By 2021, his name was added to the United States' specially designated global terrorist list, followed by severe European Union sanctions in 2022. He had become an untouchable warlord, moving seamlessly across porous borders, commanding heavily armed foreign fighters and local mercenaries who bled the civilian population dry through extortion massacres and systemic blockades. For years, Western mainstream narratives insisted that local forces were entirely helpless, without external oversight. We were told that without foreign intervention, the state would collapse. Yet, as the year 2026 unfolded, the Malian Armed Forces completely rewrote the rules of engagement. The operational reality shifted from passive defense to aggressive, intelligence-driven elimination. The setting for this historic pivot was Diabali, a strategic crossroads within the Segu region that serves as a vital gateway toward the volatile plains of Mopti. For months, the insurgent network had attempted to strangle the capital city of Bamako by establishing a brutal fuel and food blockade, aiming to break the psychological resolve of the population. They believed their clandestine base in Diabali was invisible to the state. They were fatally mistaken, acting on flawless tactical human intelligence. A joint force consisting of elite Malian commandos and specialized units from the Russian African Corps positioned themselves for a definitive counteroffensive. When the clock struck midnight on the 27th of May, the darkness over Diabali was violently shattered. This was not a prolonged chaotic skirmish, but a masterfully executed precision-targeted strike aimed directly at a high-level staging point where Saddan Hita was hosting an emergency war council with his senior lieutenants. The initial aerial bombardment caught the enemy entirely by surprise, instantly vaporizing their command structures. What followed was a relentless barrage of heavy fire from multiple propelled grenade launchers that systematically decimated the perimeter defenses. The compound was transformed into an inescapable inferno. In the ledger of this long and painful conflict, this operation was more than a successful tactical raid. It was the heavy strike of the gavel of historical justice. It sent a definitive message to every proxy group operating within the continent that the era of total impunity had reached its absolute end. The calculated destruction of this leadership cell proved that when an African nation reclaims its destiny, no stronghold is impenetrable, and no warlord is beyond the reach of national law. The provisional toll from the front line confirmed the instantaneous neutralization of several dozen enemy fighters, effectively wiping out the regional leadership core of the insurgency. In the immediate aftermath, combat patrol units clearing the site discovered an undeniable trail of blood stretching in multiple directions into the wilderness, proving that the few who managed to escape carried catastrophic injuries from the lethal shrapnel of the explosions. The logistical capability of the extremist network in the Mopti and Senegal sectors was utterly shattered in a single evening, leaving their foot soldiers leaderless, disorganized, and deeply traumatized. For the global community watching these events unfold, this decisive victory stands as an undeniable testament to what can be achieved when a nation prioritizes genuine self-determination over subservience to external masters. This is the manifestation of a deeper philosophical truth that is currently sweeping across the African continent, a refusal to accept the old paradigms of dependency. It echoes a standard that cannot be bargained away, a standard defined by a singular unyielding principle, not charity, not pity, sovereignty. The elimination of Saddan Hita has sent profound shockwaves through the entire global geopolitical landscape, forcing Western intelligence agencies to scramble for answers. The psychological impact of this decimation cannot be overstated. The myth of the invincible insurgent has been permanently broken on the battlefield of Diabali. The civilian population of Mali, who had lived under the constant shadow of terror, suddenly witnessed their own armed forces standing tall as the ultimate guardians of the Republic. But as the smoke begins to clear over the scorched earth of the Mopti borderlands, a deeper, far more complex riddle begins to emerge from the silence of the desert. How did an insurgency that possessed state-of-the-art communication equipment allow its most guarded leader to be trapped so flawlessly in a single midnight raid? The answer points directly toward an invisible, high-tech revolution unfolding across the line of contact. A modern battlefield evolution that is completely blinding the enemy and terrifying their hidden sponsors. The landscape of modern asymmetric conflict in the Sahel is undergoing a profound and terrifying metamorphosis, shattering the outdated Western stereotype of a low-tech, primitive insurgency. What we are witnessing on the front lines of Mopti and Senegal is a high-stakes electronic duel, a sophisticated technological standoff, where the traditional rules of counterinsurgency are being rewritten daily. For months, military observers from Washington to Paris have been forced to re-examine their intelligence briefs, as extremist networks, specifically the leadership cadres of Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, began deploying advanced tactics imported directly from modern European battlefields. Frontline reconnaissance missions in the northeastern sectors recently uncovered a highly disturbing development: the tactical usage of fiber-optic guided drones by insurgent cells. Unlike conventional remote-controlled aerial vehicles that rely on radio frequencies which are easily disrupted by state electronic warfare units, these fiber-optic variants trail an ultra-thin thread of glass filament behind them. This physical tether renders them completely immune to traditional signal jamming, allowing terrorists to steer explosive payloads with absolute precision into vulnerable civilian and military targets. The discovery of these advanced electronic components in informal desert markets proved that these groups are no longer isolated bandits but highly modernized proxies receiving clandestine logistical guidance. To counter this looming technological threat, the Malian Armed Forces, in close coordination with specialized electronic warfare instructors from the Russian African Corps, launched an immediate and aggressive multi-dimensional response. Instead of retreating into defensive positions, state forces chose to fight innovation with superior innovation. The skies above the line of contact are now populated by elite first-person view suicide drone squadrons, operating alongside long-range Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 surveillance platforms. This integrated aerial network acts as a constant, unblinking eye, systematically mapping out insurgent communication hubs, fuel depots, and hidden assembly points. When an enemy unit attempts to assemble a fiber optic launch platform, state-directed first-person view drones are deployed instantly to neutralize the threat before it can leave the ground. This aggressive doctrine has effectively blinded the insurgent command structure, stripping them of their tactical mobility and forcing their remaining fighters into a state of constant paranoid hiding. Let us take a solemn moment here not to rush forward blindly through the noise of war, but to give profound thanks to the historical resilience of a people reclaiming their destiny. Write a comment with a simple phrase beginning with the words "thank you" to the enduring spirit of absolute sovereignty itself. True gratitude is not a mere internet formality. It is a powerful recognition, a testament to dignity expressed in human words. When you add your voice of thanks below, whether you are watching from the heart of the American Midwest, the historic neighborhoods of Atlanta, or anywhere across the global African diaspora, you are not just engaging with a digital video, you are standing in active solidarity with a historic struggle for freedom and national pride. So before we unveil the next domestic security measures, take this brief pause to comment your thank you. Together, those collective words become a shining beacon of encouragement that reaches far beyond the screen, proving to the world that the quest for self-determination is supported by a global family. The total war against terrorism, however, cannot be won through aerial supremacy alone. It requires a radical restructuring of domestic security and a complete disruption of the enemy's everyday operational logistics. In the wake of the Diabali operation, the transitional government of Mali enacted a sweeping, unprecedented interministerial decree that struck directly at the physical lifeblood of the insurgent mobility network. Signed by the Minister of State, the Minister of Economy and Finance, alongside the Ministers of Defense, Justice, and Infrastructure, this legal mandate indefinitely suspended the import, transit, marketing, sale, and free distribution of all motorcycles with an engine capacity of 125 cubic centimeters or more, including all associated spare parts. For years, the undisputed transport weapon of choice for these extremist sects has been the ultra-durable Honda motorcycle. Possessing multiple gears and an unparalleled capacity to navigate the harsh, roadless terrain of the Sahel, these machines allowed fighters to launch lightning cross-border raids before dissolving back into the wilderness. By imposing a total ban on these specific high-capacity vehicles, the Malian state has effectively gridlocked the enemy's tactical supply lines, rendering them immobile and stranded in the deep desert. This structural crackdown has been accompanied by a massive nationwide psychological mobilization of the civilian population, transforming ordinary communities into an impenetrable wall of domestic intelligence. Recognizing that national security is a collective responsibility, the transitional authorities held a major summit with traditional chiefs, religious leaders, and youth representatives to implement real-time vigilance mechanisms. Toll-free emergency hotline numbers have been established across every district, allowing citizens to report unfamiliar individuals or suspicious activities instantly to the appropriate security branches. Furthermore, the Ministries of Culture and Youth have issued strict directives to property owners and short-term hospitality providers, demanding rigorous identification checks for any guest arriving for short periods. The state has explicitly warned the population to move away from prioritizing short-term financial greed over collective national survival. In a beautiful display of interfaith unity, Muslim religious scholars have pledged to use their pulpits to de-radicalize vulnerable youths, while the Catholic Christian community of Mali has integrated daily prayers into every holy mass for the protection of the state leadership. As the roar of illegal motorcycle engines falls silent across the borders, this absolute unification of military might, technological innovation, and civilian resolve has created an unbreakable domestic fortress. Yet as Mali consolidates this historic internal victory, the true scale of this geopolitical awakening is beginning to expand outward, binding neighboring nations into a permanent revolutionary shield under a singular fearless strategic mind. The tactical fallout from the definitive elimination of Saddan and Hita reaches far beyond the immediate borderlands of Mali, sending a powerful wave of strategic relief through the entire geographical architecture of West Africa. For too long, neo-colonial analysts in distant Western capitals treated these sovereign nations as fragmented, isolated territories incapable of managing their own internal security. They engineered a psychological narrative of perpetual despair, claiming that the departure of foreign military garrisons would immediately invite total regional collapse. Instead, the coordinated triumph in the Mopti sector has fully vindicated the revolutionary strategy of Captain Ibrahim Traore, the courageous transitional leader of Burkina Faso. The extremist network led by Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin operated as a fluid cross-border syndicate, using the porous borders of northern Mali as a sanctuary to launch catastrophic raids against innocent civilians across the frontier, most notably during the heartbreaking historical incursions in Barcelogo. By completely severing the logistical spine of this terror apparatus in Diabali, the joint forces have effectively relieved the immense military pressure bearing down on the Burkinabe front line. This is the living manifestation of a new architecture of collective defense, proving that the alliance of Sahel states is no longer a mere diplomatic framework written on parchment, but an ironclad reality forged in the crucible of shared sacrifice. Under the strategic foresight of leaders like Ibrahim Traore, the defensive paradigm has shifted permanently, demonstrating to the global community that an assault on one sovereign African nation is now answered by the unified fury of the entire continent. Simultaneously, this battlefield victory has triggered an unprecedented wave of domestic civil and political mobilization within the local populace, fundamentally altering the internal security order of the state. The transitional authorities recognize that true security cannot be achieved by kinetic operations alone. It requires the complete fortification of the collective civilian consciousness. In a beautiful display of societal unity that completely defies Western mainstream media portrayals, various social strata have stepped forward to form an impenetrable wall against foreign subversion. During a major national gathering connecting regional governors via extensive video conferences, traditional community chiefs and youth representatives pledged their unconditional support to the national cause. Islamic scholars and Muslim religious leaders throughout Mali have actively stepped forward, utilizing their moral authority to psychologically prepare the population and inoculate vulnerable youth against the venom of extremist propaganda, thereby reclaiming the peaceful identity of their faith. Concurrently, the domestic Christian community has deeply mirrored this patriotic commitment, integrating solemn prayers into every Catholic Eucharist and Holy Mass for the protection of the transitional leaders and the preservation of national peace. Landlords and short-term hospitality providers have been strictly ordered to implement rigorous identification mechanisms, ensuring that financial greed never compromises collective national survival. This holistic approach demonstrates that effective Mali counter-terrorism is not merely achieved through weaponized strengths, but through the deep psychological resilience of an entire population refusing to let foreign-funded actors fracture their ancestral homeland. This profound awakening demonstrates that when a people reclaim their narrative, the old mechanics of division crumble beneath the weight of true solidarity. Now let us turn this story into a shared moment of solidarity. Take a second to write in the comments where you are watching this video from your city, your state, or your country. The Upright Chronicles would like to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who supports independent truth, and we send to each of you a heartfelt wish. May your homeland be blessed with dignity, absolute sovereignty, and unyielding light. As the civilian population inside Mali and Burkina Faso celebrates this historic consolidation of national dignity, an unsettling anomaly has begun to surface within the global information ecosystem. long before the official military communiques could be processed or released by local defense ministries. Western intelligence networks and foreign diplomatic outlets began publishing highly detailed reports confirming the precise demise of Saddan ag Hita. This extraordinary speed has raised profound psychological and political questions across the African diaspora and among analytical minds worldwide. How did intelligence agencies located thousands of miles away in Western capitals possess instantaneous, operational knowledge of a top-secret midnight raid deep in the Sahelian interior? The answer to this multi-billion-dollar riddle does not lie in superior Western satellite technology, but in a hidden trail of financial logistics that exposes the dark, duplicitous machinery of modern global intervention. The sudden lightning-fast dissemination of intelligence regarding the elimination of Saddan ag Hita by Western operative networks brings us directly to an old, immutable principle of global political investigation: follow the money. It is an extraordinary paradox that the very institutions that continuously lecture West African nations on security deficiencies are always the first to possess intimate, highly classified data on the demise of top-tier insurgent commanders. For decades, the multi-million-dollar apparatus of the United States Agency for International Development, operating alongside an intricate network of non-governmental organizations, has claimed to fund purely humanitarian endeavors across the continent. Yet, analytical minds within the African diaspora are increasingly asking uncomfortable questions about the true structural alignment of these immense financial flows. When the Alliance of Sahel states chose to strictly monitor and cancel the operational licenses of specific foreign monitored channels, the immediate hysterical uproar from Western proxies like Human Rights Watch was telling. They did not mourn the loss of civilian stability. They decried the loss of their unhindered access to sovereign territories. Who else would be in the absolute best position to instantly verify the death of a supreme insurgent commander other than the very entities that indirectly subsidize the regional geopolitical chaos? This is not a matter of wild speculation. It is a question of profound institutional accountability versus systemic impunity. As the revolutionary dynamics of Sahel drone warfare and decisive ground offensives continue to obliterate these armed proxies on the line of contact, the Western diplomatic mask is slipping entirely. Unable to maintain their historical economic and military dominance through traditional coercion, external powers are relying heavily on weaponized media narratives to destabilize African leadership. A perfect illustration of this psychological warfare occurred during a highly publicized international interview where French media agents masquerading as independent journalists attempted to corner and humiliate the transitional president of Gabon. The interviewer aggressively demanded to know why Gabon refused to join the international chorus condemning the military leadership in the Sahel, repeatedly utilizing the derogatory, highly weaponized term putschists. And the intention was transparent: to isolate the alliance of Sahel states and project an image of continental fragmentation. However, the response from the Gabonese head of state was an absolute masterclass in sovereign dignity, completely breaking the patronizing arrogance of the Western press. With a calm, defiant smile, he looked directly into the camera and shattered the colonial framing. He explicitly refused to adopt the language of the oppressor, stating clearly that he would never use such insulting terminology to describe his fellow military colleagues, whom he proudly called his brothers in arms. He reminded the global audience that Gabon's actions constituted a liberation coup born of a deep domestic necessity to save the republic from systemic domestic corruption, rather than a mindless quest for raw power. He pointedly told the Western press that it was high time the international community left these sovereign African states alone to execute their national duties without constant external frustration and condescension. He noted that whether a leader is part of a transitional council or a civilian administration, they remain the absolute head of state of their independent country, and no foreign power possesses the moral or legal authority to dictate their political destiny. This powerful display of fraternal solidarity demonstrates a monumental shift in the collective psychology of the continent. The old days where European capitals could sneakily impose divisive narratives to pit one African nation against another are permanently gone. Today, a new generation of leaders is emerging, standing shoulder to shoulder. Like the true brothers, they are united by a shared history and a common future. They are proving that African problems can only be resolved through genuine African solutions formulated by those who understand the soil beneath their feet. But as this wave of unyielding resistance solidifies across Central and West Africa, the ultimate test of this geopolitical revolution is shifting toward the coastal gateway of Senegal, where a fierce domestic political struggle is about to decide if the old demons of institutional subversion will ever be truly conquered. The roadmap for the future of the Sahel is no longer dictated by the conditional loans of Bretton Woods institutions or the paternalistic oversight of former colonial capitals. What lies ahead for the alliance of Sahel states is a calculated, unyielding march toward complete strategic self-reliance. The triumph in Diabali and the sweeping operational successes across Mopti are not isolated military victories. They are the structural foundation of an entirely new geopolitical blueprint. This roadmap is defined by a clear, uncompromised objective: the total indigenization of national security, the absolute reclamation of mineral sovereignty, and the psychological decolonization of the domestic populace. In the year 2026, the risks are undoubtedly immense. Western powers, having lost their physical military footprints, are pivoting toward aggressive economic warfare, utilizing currency manipulation and artificial credit downgrades to sabotage these nascent republics. Yet the opportunities born of this systemic defiance far outweigh the immediate structural friction. By building an ironclad security architecture independent of Western funding, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are proving to the world that true independence cannot be bought. It must be actively enforced. This structural transformation requires a radical departure from the old developmental paradigms that kept the continent in a state of perpetual vassalage. For decades, the immense wealth of the Sahel was systematically extracted to enrich foreign treasuries, while local populations were left entirely without basic access to electricity, clean water, or modern universities. The generation of leaders standing at the helm today understands that true sovereignty is entirely hollow if it does not translate directly into the material upliftment of the masses. Therefore, the economic roadmap of the alliance prioritizes the domestic processing of natural resources, ensuring that the gold of Mali and the agricultural bounty of the plains serve the citizens first. It is an intricate process of reclaiming the table where global contracts are signed. This is not a chaotic disruption of global trade. It is a calculated demand for equal partnership and insistence that African wealth belongs exclusively to Africa. The psychological impact of this economic shift is profound, instilling a renewed sense of pride and ownership among ordinary citizens who now see themselves as active participants in a continental renaissance rather than passive victims of global exploitation. Moreover, this path forward is deeply anchored in a profound philosophy of pan-African solidarity that transcends old colonial borders. The strategic integration of the Sahelian states creates an ideological fortress that is entirely immune to the historic divide and rule tactics of external actors. When the youth of Bamako, the traditional chiefs of Ouagadougou, and the intellectual cadres of Niamey speak with a singular, unyielding voice, they are dismantling centuries of enforced fragmentation. This is the ultimate victory of the African spirit, a reclamation of historical memory and collective identity. It sends a powerful message of hope to the entire global African diaspora, demonstrating that the struggle for dignity is being won on the very soil where exploitation was once codified. The future belongs to those who are brave enough to write their own archives, to those who refuse to let foreign capitals dictate who their partners should be. It is a testament to an unshakable truth. The era of continental subservience has drawn to a definitive close. Yet as these sovereign nations look toward this golden horizon of economic independence and military self-determination, a final monumental question looms over the entire architecture of this historic struggle. Can this newly forged unity withstand the invisible multi-layered pressures of global isolation? Or are the enemies of African progress preparing an even more insidious trap within the very institutions designed to protect the international order? To understand the ultimate destiny of this revolutionary shift, we must step out of the immediate battlefields and examine the enduring legacy that this generation is leaving for the future. The narrative of a broken, helpless Africa is being permanently laid to rest in the scorched sands of Mopti and Diabali. This momentous turning point demonstrates that the sacred destiny of the continent will no longer be bartered away in the smoky corridors of foreign capitals or compromise-driven international assemblies. Through the rigorous lens of modern history, what we are witnessing is a profound tectonic redefinition of statehood itself. It is an emerging world where national security is proudly reclaimed and ancestral pride is fully restored to the global African diaspora. This is not a temporary shift in policy, nor is it a fleeting moment of political convenience, not reform, not rhetoric, accountability. This is the uncompromising new standard governing the sovereign plains of West Africa, written in the actions of a people who refuse to bow. The spectacular success of Mali counterterrorism initiatives proves beyond all doubt that when a nation exercises its absolute inherent right to self-defense, the archaic structures of neo-colonial manipulation dissolve into irrelevance. The rapid, masterful evolution of Sahel drone warfare has permanently altered the balance of global power, showing the international community that high-tech advancement is no longer an exclusive Western privilege. Yet, as the old empires look on with growing anxiety, a fundamental question remains for analytical observers across the globe. If a nation has the vote but not the voice, is it truly a democracy? True independence demands both geopolitical autonomy and internal structural control. Therefore, the ongoing brilliant execution of domestic Mali counter-terrorism strategies remains a vital, unyielding shield for the absolute preservation of continental dignity. Before we close, let us pause. What you have just witnessed and heard today is not simply an isolated episode of distant history. It is a living reminder that sovereignty, dignity, and hope are still vibrantly alive, waiting to be claimed by those who are brave enough to stand upright. If this profound message has moved your spirit, then subscribe to this channel. Not because we ask for empty statistical numbers, but because we are actively building a shared sanctuary where the voices of true independence are fundamentally honored and where stories of unyielding pride continue to be told without fear. By subscribing to the Upright Chronicles, you are choosing to walk hand in hand with us into the next glorious chapter of Africa's unfolding story. The dawn of an entirely new era is here. The chains are breaking, and this sacred light will never be extinguished.